And we are back again for another episode. Week 3 of Movies on the Islands month. Maybe one of our more ridiculous names in the entire run of the show. We're here to talk about Battle Royale, which is somewhat similar but also somewhat different to the films we've already covered so far. And we have a wonderful special guest, Mr. Paul Oyama, returns to the podcast.
Well, my first and only appearance on the show is going to be really exciting. I've never been invited on the show before, so it's really nice to finally get that. I've been sending in mail for a long time, and I'm excited to finally appear. I mean, the two hosts of this podcast figured if anybody knows about being Japanese and surviving on an island, but just barely, it's me. So let's do it.
I mean, if you are Japanese, you are on an island, and you may have been injured recently. So, like, I feel
yes. I am much like our hero of this movie, in that I am in crutches for the most recent time period that you see me. So
I will say your locks are just not as impressive as some.
No, that's right. I'm not like a live action anime boy like many are in this movie are.
The Battle Royale franchise, where men have crazy bleached and spiky hair.
That's like being Japanese in 14. And I gotta.
There's a particularly crazy one in the second Battle Royale film where one of the kids has like bleached white hair and just sticks in all directions. He looks like a porcupine or something.
Did 2003 United States appropriate Japanese culture, or did Japan take this after 2003 California bleached hair boys?
No, I think it was I think it's the anime wave. I mean, we'll get into a little bit of sort of the anime influence or like the live action anime almost qualities of the movie that we're covering today. But I do think that that's a big part of kind of the style, and I do think it was a bit emulated. I mean, I think that's just Americans discovering anime too and being like, yo, these guys look cool. I'm gonna look like these guys.
I haven't discovered it yet, so I think next year is my bleached spikes.
Yeah.
Going for it. 2022 Zack, bleached spikes.
I'm excited for bleached Zack hair. Before we dive all the way into Battle Royale, let's jump into the last letterboxed movie. Zack, why don't you go first? Tell us what you've been watching.
Okay, I've definitely been prepared for this segment for the past 2 days. Okay, so my most recent watched movie on Letterboxd is Clash by Night. There, other than me doing like these mini-year marathons where I let a random generator decide everything in my life. Honestly, I was between marrying 10 women, and
that's how Theo came to be, huh? That's how Theo came to be. It was a wheeldecide.com.
It landed on number 4, and I'm like, okay, Sarah's the woman I guess I have to marry out of the 10 options.
Nice of her to go along with it.
Yeah, she didn't know this was involved, and she doesn't know about the other 9 women. She doesn't listen to this podcast, so we're good. Okay. Anyways, Clash by Night. I was doing 1952, and I specifically chose this movie because the only Babs Stanwyck is in it. My girl. We just talked about her for 5 episodes. Great performance. As always, it's kind of it's a Fritz Lang directed movie. Later in his career, based on a play, and it does. Play as that. So this is the closest I felt like I'm watching Barbara Stanwyck on a stage doing this kind of melodramatic role compared to all the other roles I've seen, which I think she does really great. And, she plays this kind of, middle-aged woman, middle-aged in like classic Hollywood sense of what middle-aged would be. But that weariness, that tiredness of love, and that like having this like kind of rebellious streak, but trying to push it down and do what's best for herself. I think she does really well. It is, best served as a vehicle for watching great acting. I think the 3 leads, Robert Ryan, Paul Douglas, Barbara Stanwyck, all really good. I think Paul Douglas especially is just like plays that kind of lovable schlub really well, and even though he's kind of
so is he like a Ron Livingston type in this, basically, like that kind of character, like Ron Livingston and Tully kind of guy, like the kind of like he's just there, he's around, like maybe he's not very active.
Honestly, he's more like a Marty if Marty was more charming and thing, but just a little schlubbier than Ron Livingston is.
Wow.
But I think he's just more charming and nice. He's just like a really nice guy. So you still believe why Barbara Stanwyck in that part of life is going for him. But seeing him kind of go through the moments of heartbreak, I found really great. It's probably the standout. As a movie as a whole, it doesn't, I think, have tons to offer because I said the melodrama is a little, I've seen many things like it. It's probably not the greatest play ever written, but yeah, great actor vehicle piece at least.
And yeah, Robert Ryan, like I pretty much only know him as like a villain in westerns. So like him as a romantic co-lead.
And
seems kind of interesting.
he's kind of the romantic villain in a way in this as well.
Okay.
So he's still playing off of that angle of him.
And this is Marilyn Monroe too, right? Is in this?
Yeah, Marilyn
I don't know how much
Monroe
she's
is
in
a
it,
very small part. She is her brother's like fiance, so it's almost that like love in the early stages compared to her kind of after she's been battle worn.
Got it.
I'm assuming this is pre Monroe's like career breakout. This is
It's her first, not first.
This
movie,
is the
but
year
first time she was
before
on-
Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, I think. So
Okay,
I
it was
think it's right before that.
It was like the first time she was on like the poster. Like her movie was like her name was. I forget the phrase for that.
she's credited on the poster. Yeah.
Like Top Billed. Is that what you're
Top Billed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have not seen this. I'm assuming Paul, you have not seen this either.
No. Zach mentioned it as something that he was planning on watching. It sounds like mildly interesting, but like for me, from what I found, like the Fritz Lang outside of like sort of the known masterpieces is pretty like solid, but not spectacular. I think like his great movies are great, and beyond that, like he has a lot of sort of like middle of the road stuff. So like maybe I'll watch it. I'm not like super, Zach's pitch doesn't sound like it's like a rush out
I think
and
you'll
see.
be okay. Yeah.
So probably skip that one, but who knows? Maybe I'll come around to it eventually.
Yeah. Compared to the 5.5 Barbara Salick movies we talked about, including Remember the Night, this is my least favorite of those 7 that I've seen.
Okay.
Yeah. I guess in that context, it does feel like a lot of other films of the same era, just very kind of rom-com-y relationship.
I think there's a reason it's
Rom-
not
rom-com.
really known now. It's I'm sure it's solid, but like I'm sure if it was like the kind of thing where if there was any specific standout element, like it would be like remember this movie Clash by Night.
And another kind of selling point for me is I legitimately thought this was a film noir. I don't know why. I think it's the title. So I like had no idea what I was going into. But it took like 2 minutes for me to understand that this is.
Yeah,
not gonna be
I saw
noir,
this
but-
on your Letterboxd, and I was like, did he watch They Live by Night, which I watched and loved this year, which is like a Nicholas Ray movie, but I was like, that is not the same movie.
I think that might be where I'm crossing together.
We all know the only reason Zach watched this movie is because he wanted to tie me for a number of Barbara Stanwyck films watched because he just liked claiming to be her biggest fan while having watched less than I had.
It was very frustrating. So I gotta get one more to take the lead.
All right, well, we'll see how that contest goes. Paul, what's the last thing you watched, Log?
Yeah, so before the show, we were talking a little bit about, or even in the beginning of the show, talking a little about anime and everything. And the last thing I've logged, actually, is the Neon Genesis Evangelion movie, The End of Evangelion, which is like, if you're on Letterboxd, it's like one of the highest rated things on the site, kind of. And, like Eva as a series, like it's kind of a well-known anime. It's like, very much of a piece of the 90s. It's Hideaki Anno. And it's essentially this show is about this young boy named Shinji who becomes drafted into this program where this small group of children has to pilot these mechs to fight these giant creatures named angels who are coming to sort of take over the earth. And then it's a film that's very much about existentialism. And this movie is like a reimagining of the end of the series. It's this very much like Shinji kind of looking in a mirror and looking sort of through the lens of time and seeing like what his impact on the world is and how he wants to live his life. It's one of my favorite animated films of all time. It's a thing I discovered sort of like in the middle of quarantine and really kind of blew me away. It's really not for everyone. I think the show, you have to watch the show to really understand the movie at all. But it's very much like something that's about like burrowing into your soul and your mind and examining sort of like what the root of your happiness and unhappiness in life is and seeing like if you're willing to change that or the risks you're willing to take as a person, which again sounds very high-minded, but that is kind of what this series is. Recently, the creator released these group of movies that are like a redo of the entire series from square one. There's a series of 4 movies that just dropped all on Amazon Prime, and I'm planning to watch those for the first time. But I rewatched the movie, and this movie still like really like sends me into such a spiral of thinking and sort of like almost feeling like I'm like Doctor Strange astral projecting outside of myself and seeing my body. But it's fascinating, and it's one of those things I love to think about. And is incredible animation-wise and everything. But yeah, it's a movie that I think, again, like if you're into anime, I think it's very much something I'd recommend. But if you're not, it might be a tough like first kind of introduction thing. But I think it's like one of the great like media franchises of the last 20 or so years, just in terms of like what it says and where it's willing to go. Because I think like when you think of animated movies and shows and stuff, it's not this kind of these kind of topics, and this is very like, I don't know, it's also very influential, I think, in a lot of other stuff. But yeah, Eva is a series that has become important to me, even though I wasn't somebody who watched it early on. I know it's a big early anime for people, but yeah, End of Evangelion, it's a pretty wild, and like it is one of the crazier animated movies that you'll see, I think.
I'm pretty convinced I would love it. But I just haven't, there's so much time in a day, and I want to do the series.
Yeah, if you do,
if I get like a sick day or like a snow day this year, I think I can like really delve into it a little bit. But because it seems like something I want to devote my thoughts to for a moment too.
Yes. It's not something you want to be like, let's watch one episode of this and then let's turn on Ted Lasso or something. Like, it's not that kind of show, I think. It is like very much something you want to sit in.
Yeah.
But,
so if I ever get a break from normal life, maybe I'll, because I think just you sell really well to me with the depth and the kind of philosophical concepts.
And it's using this like mech action skin to really get at these ideas that I think like would be hard to like sell somebody on like watching something if it wasn't like told through some kind of like lens like that, where there is like something else going on visually along with sort of the ideas.
And it's really lived a second life since the Netflix release. I feel like it's really became part of conversation a lot.
I mean, especially now too, with like the rebuild movies being on Amazon now, and like everyone can watch them. Like it is this like it is his opus in so many ways, right? As a creator. But yeah, I mean, if people might not know this, he's actually in The Wind Rises. He like in the Japanese version, he voices the main character, and it's like considered like one of the great kind of voice performances in like animated film history. And that was like a side project for him in the middle of making like these rebuild movies. So he's a great filmmaker, and like someone I think a lot of people haven't really seen, but it's well worth your time, I think.
So you do need to watch the TV show to really
understand
the movie.
I mean the movie already, even if you've seen the show, to be honest, the movie doesn't like quote unquote make sense, but like you will be lost, and a lot of the stuff won't mean much to you unless you have like the investment in the character of Shinji and Asuka and all these other people, Misato and stuff. But yeah, certainly definitely an anime for the sad boys out there, I would say.
All right, well, if I ever
feel like you just called us sad boys, which is
it's sometimes with art, that's how I feel sometimes.
I like to think we're more happy boys. There is like aiming on how to be happy.
Well, it's about finding happiness, right, within your sadness, and that's like a lot of what the show and movie's about, in a very beautiful way, I think.
Yeah.
All right. Talking of finding happiness inside your sadness, the last thing I watched is I finally caught up with Zack Snyder's Army of the Dead.
What is the fucking sad intro? What does that have to do with happiness?
Yes, nothing. It's called a segue. It's a zombie movie about basically a team going into Las Vegas to get money from a casino. I'm not a big Zack Snyder fan. I feel like that's well documented at this point. I find his work kind of frustrating. I think he spends a lot of his movies pretending that he's doing Shakespeare when he's doing like something that's just dumb action violence. At least in this, he seems to like understand what he's going for. It's kind of just a kind of dumb, fun zombie team up action movie. And then at the end, they have this real emotional scene between two of the characters that's supposed to play one way, but like they don't set it up at all. It's not earned by the entire plot of the story, and it really soured me on the end of the film. I was very frustrated by being like, you did not set up an emotional relationship between these characters in your story. You set up a fun team up with a bunch of bad people. You basically set up Suicide Squad going into zombie land, but like you did not set up an emotional like arc for these characters, and also don't have the actors to pull it off. And it really soured me on the film, and I ended up giving it sort of a negative grade. But I will say that if Zack Snyder wants to continue making movies in this vein, I kind of enjoy I ignore the acknowledgement of that he's making a silly kind of violent zombie movie, and that's not trying to be Shakespeare. I think his work is better when he acknowledges when like what he thinks he's doing and what he's actually doing connect.
Don't you think this is still kind of going for the Shakespeare thing though, especially with the zombie king and queen thing and how like that operatic that whole thing is? I think that's very much is kind of going for. I think he's still putting those themes in, which I think is like, those are the things he's interested in as a filmmaker. So it's like the messianic, like that stuff is like what matters to him, I guess, in art. So I feel like I get what you're saying though, like where it's like this is a different lens to view it rather than like through something that's got these expectations behind it in a way that I think it's kind of like becomes too much weight for some of them to bear.
Well, like I think the failure of his entire DCU run is that the expectations and the things he's trying to do storytelling wise, rather than telling just like a fun story where there's some action and some good character beats, is he's trying to tell, Henry IV in every single superhero movie. And it's like, there's no way on earth you pulled it off. And I kind of enjoyed this. This felt more
like... he should make the sequel. Henry V is way better anyway. You shouldn't be interested in the prequel. Just go to the next entry in the franchise.
I will say...
And Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer right after that. It's like all the Henry movies. Back to back.
And honestly, on paper, that doesn't sound like a bad idea. Like a Henry V Superman movie, I think could be good with someone who is like intelligent and understands human emotions in a deeper way. But it's the most like trite version of trying to tell these stories. And same with Army of the Dead. It's just I understand of drama. It's just not like complex and thoughtful enough to be interesting.
He has a trouble understanding like what he thinks scenes are. His audience is not seeing. Like that to me, and I think that's a consistent frustrating thing with him and emotion, is he has these scenes which are, in his eyes, a really emotional scene. You see these throughout the Superman movies with like his parents, and like he clearly thinks they're incredibly emotional scenes. And
I think we might be projecting a little bit onto him as like what he thinks or what, like I don't know if that's like what like I don't think that's a very interesting conversation. I think just more like if for you it doesn't land emotional beats that it's good. I think that's different than like what he sees in his mind, because I don't know, speaking for him, I think feels a bit unfair. Fair. And he's honestly like a good sport about a lot of this shit too, especially like in the media, like in a way that I think like a lot of people are not as much. I wouldn't be in his position, kind of thing. So like in a weird way, I do kind of root for him in a way. But yeah,
I honestly, it's not. I just wish he would do stuff that fits his sensibilities. And I will say that even though I did not love this movie, Army of the Dead feels more Zack Snyder sensibilities, feels to fit with his sensibilities better than like his DCU run. It's just like he feels like he is. I would rather watch a movie where he's having fun doing crazy shit with zombies and like doing some goofy stuff there than watch him like kind of butcher superhero characters to make some weird things that doesn't work for me. I mean, it does still have the Zack Snyder moments. There's still some moments in the movie where I kind of roll my eyes at like, he's a little overindulgent. He likes, slow motion.
How do you feel about the music thing? Because I feel like it's weird how people like specifically rag on him for his music, his music insertions, and it's like there's so many movies that do the same exact thing. I feel like that don't get half the flack for it. I think they're fine. Like putting zombie, like the Cranberry song, like it's a good song and it fits. I don't know, like it's not.
I didn't hate it. It was not a game breaker for me. I thought it was a little bit like it was a little trite. I was like, okay, we put the song called Zombie. I was like, but like I'm not gonna like go out there and be like, that's the deal breaker for me. That was not the thing that frustrated me in the movie.
On the nose is never. I have to touch my nose, as they say. Nose, it's a requirement. It never really bothers me, but I will say I have a lot of problems with Zack Snyder's use of music, specifically in the Justice League, for different reasons. I think they're just very miscalculated tonally. Very often when he's like playing Sugar Rose songs, when you have Aquaman diving into the water and it's supposed to be like badass, I just like don't get it. It's just like these weird ballady moments don't work.
Yeah, I will say that the implementation of Tig Notaro and Army of the Dead kind of blows me away, like how seamless it is. Like I would not believe that it was like a CGI after the fact, like recreated. Like to me, like it was totally seamless.
But she never acted with anybody else. She never saw another actor on this film.
She was replacing
Chris D'Elia.
D'Elia right after like the pedo stuff came out about him.
Yes.
Yeah. So no, you're right. But you can also tell that they were able to pull it off because you'd never see them all in the same shot. They're always a little bit like it's well done, but also it sort of is the same thing. You can go back to like the Christopher Plummer, where it's like it's interesting. He's always I will say the bummer for me was I loved Amari Hardwick in this movie, and like the end with his character like really fucking bummed me out, man. Like the post credit scene, I was like, this sucks. Like I was like, it was cool to me that it was like, oh, like look what happened to him, and then all of a sudden it's like, just kidding. He's actually. I was like, okay, that's not.
Oh, I did not know there was a post-credit scene.
So he wakes up and he's like he's still alive in Vegas, like in the safe, and he comes out and he seems like he survived. He's on a plane, but then on the plane he like turned, like he'd collected the money and everything, but then he turns back into his aunt, and I'm like, God damn it! Like
that's the final shot of the film. Yeah, and it's also frustrating because you just had like what was supposed to be your big emotional kind of sad moment with Dave Bautista, and then it's like, wait, are you seriously going to tack on another moment where it goes poorly for a character? Like that's just bad storytelling. You need to balance those aspects. You need to. It did
feel like the Rise of the Planet of the Apes like scene at the airport at the end where it's like, aha, zombies are in the world now, and it's like but teasing because I think there is a sequel. I want to say in development. I think.
I believe he's talked to. I believe isn't the guy who played the Safecracker doing?
Yeah, so that's like a prequel. That's like a prequel. He's like
That's
directing
so
himself in a prequel, which is insane. Yeah, Matthias Schweighofer.
Isn't he like one of the biggest actors in Germany?
Yes,
So
I think he's like I think he's like one of the big German stars. It's crazy. Yeah. Anyway, that's all. We talked a lot about Army of the Dead. Not even the main movie of this episode.
No, we're doing a whole month on this this spin-off prequel.
Oh yeah, so there's a sequel in development. There's a prequel film called Army of Thieves. That's the one he's directing.
Yeah.
And there's an anime series called Army of Dead Las Vegas.
Sounds kind of good. You know,
I would say that could be enjoyable.
Sounds kind of good.
It might actually work.
Although I'm not really into zombie anime stuff usually, so
No.
like we'll see what happens because like Tokyo Ghoul, like the big sort of zombie animes, generally I'm not super into. But who knows? Who knows if I'll even watch it? To be honest, will I actually watch it?
No,
50.
probably not.
Probably like 30, 70. Probably not.
I don't think you're gonna watch a prequel anime series to something that you probably didn't like.
You underestimate the amount of anime series I've watched.
You know who is going to watch it? Lucas, because he's like, I watched the
Lucas is
first
not gonna-
one, and I'm gonna watch the series and the prequel.
That's
and the
not-
sequel.
I would like to argue back. I like to point out I only watched one Jackass film, and I stopped because I didn't like the first one.
What the fuck? The one good franchise, you don't even watch all of them. What the hell is that?
Hey,
Oh my
not funny.
god.
one of my 4 half-stars movies is to a Jackass franchise.
Well, okay, Bad Grandpa is, I would say, a little different than like Jackass 2, Jackass 3D. Like that's not quite the same thing. Anyway, Jackass Forever has a great poster and will be a great movie. I'm predicting it. I'm calling it that.
Best Picture winner, 2022, Paul Oyama.
Maybe.
But put it on the poster.
Stay tuned. The co-Oscars are going to honor it. If it's over my dead body, it will happen.
Well, I mean, all you need is 2 people to vote for it.
Exactly. If the climb can get on there, like anything's possible. Truly, anything's possible.
I know. We have to pick our next year's mediocre indie film to vote for.
Let's
all.
go.
We're not invited to the Go
But
Oscars nomination panels. I don't know what the fuck
I was
you're
on the
talking
panel. I was on the panel the last 2 years running. Anyway, enough.
All
about
right.
that.
We've talked about enough silly stuff. The Dig is our prediction for next year. We're going to push the Dig hard.
Did you watch
I
it?
still got to see that.
I did watch the Dig.
That seems like some real Lucas core.
I was a fan, but like it's not a great movie, but like it's a real fun hangout with like British people. Let's jump ahead. We're talking about Battle Royale, which is set on an island, so it ties into the month. Zach, I'm gonna make you start the plot summary, and I'll jump in if I can help you out if you need help.
So, Japan is in a futuristic recession, correct?
Sounds
yeah,
accurate.
essentially.
Something like that. Okay.
Social upheaval.
Yeah, there's shit happening, and the youth are just kind of in a way that I think is pretty historic, kind of just like rebelling as the country around them is kind of falling apart. So the high school people are just like, doing whatever the fuck they want to a sad, lonely Mr. Ford gets nice side. Where does he get cut on his hand or side? He gets.
I think it's on his leg. Yeah. Oh, it's kind of not totally clear. It's somewhere on his midsection side.
Okay, that's okay. So he gets cut by a student, the friend of our lead that we get to know later, and then we flash forward. The same kind of school group school year is on a bus to where
Zach, if you had to guess, what grade are these students in?
They say ninth grade, but they're definitely.
So you do remember. You do. I wasn't sure if that stuck for you.
Yeah, they're definitely in like 18th grade by age. I feel like schools are different in country to country, so I just try to pretend that ninth grade wasn't the same to Japan as it was to us. But that was how my mind got past. I'm now looking 14 years old. Anyway, so they go on. Their bus gets they black out. I'm like blanking on a bunch of shit.
All right. They go on a field trip.
Yeah, they get gas.
They get gas. They wake up on an
okay,
island.
Yeah.
The teacher that got injured at the beginning comes in and goes, "You are little shits, and now we've created rules that are make you kill each other." They set up the rules of the Battle Royale, which is that
weird. The kids didn't know about this, by the way. this national
and
law.
this wasn't a thing. And this is not the first one. It's at least a third.
No.
It's at least a third, but we don't know how many they did, right?
Yeah, because they show the creepy little girl with the doll who's like, this female Joker over here. Yeah,
and you have 2 returning victors.
Yeah. Well, that's not confirmed
for the other guy. Now, here's just a volunteer.
Yeah, I think he's just crazy.
You have 2 people who seem like they potentially know what's going on more than the rest of the students.
Yes.
The teacher lays out the rules of the game. Everyone's got a collar on. Basically, if they go into a danger zone, if they try to do anything that the people don't like, it blows up, they die.
A la Suicide Squad. Yeah, which is, ties into our movie theme of this month.
It is very clearly like Suicide Squad at times. Everyone gets a weapon. They basically, is it 72 hours?
Well, they get an item. It's not always a weapon. Somebody gets a pot.
They get a
pot
weapon.
lid.
They get a weapon. They're told they get a weapon, but not everything is as valuable as everything else. They go and they're told they have 72 hours, and the only way they all get off the island is one person has to remain at the end. Everybody has to die but one. So very, very much like it's very clear that like when Suzanne Collins was writing the Hunger Games, she basically took the Hunger Games. The rules for the game is
no comment, as Susan Collins is a fellow alumni of Indiana University Bloomington, so I will not be commenting at this time.
Oh, it's not a criticism. It's very clear that this is she does her own thing with it, but it's very clearly taking the rules.
And they're wearing like collars. So if they are in a danger zone, basically they are taking out different territories on the land to get them closer together. So at different times if they don't leave, their head explodes, which then leads to, before they even get out, 2 people get killed. One gets their head exploded.
The guy who originally injured the teacher in the first place is the first one to die.
Yes.
And then another.
And then the teacher throws a knife at a girl's head.
That's the first one.
Because she's talking.
The first murder.
Because she's talking during the rules, which I respect. Let him read the rules, goddamn.
Is this a fever dream of mine? Sort of. I don't want to get fired, so I don't want to say too much.
Zach has no weapons. Just so we're clear, Zach is a harmless pacifist. He is in love towards all. They get sent to the island, and they basically have to fight it out, and then it becomes just a gigantic... I kept thinking Zimbardo and Milgram the entire time. Zimbardo with the Stanford prison experiment and like the taking of roles in the scenario, and then Milgram for the idea that like if you get an authority figure to tell you that stuff's okay, people start acting crazy ways. You also get a really cool stuff going on where you have 9th graders, so they're not only just fighting for their lives, they're also kind of paying off all these really petty hatreds and like small beefs they've been having along, and they're been given an opportunity to kind of act on those in the way they haven't.
Hey, some of them just want to kiss. Some of them just want to kiss each other, man. They got crushes, and that's all what it's all about. When you're
I will resist you with every fiber of my being. One of the all-time great lines in the film. And then slowly over time, they die. You see alliances get formed. You see people become sort of alpha predators, taking out many of the others. You see alpha predators get taken out. You see people commit suicide because they refuse to participate in the games. And we get down to the end of it, and they run into Shua, who is basically our main hero, and sort of, I don't know if it's 100% confirmed, a previous victor and somebody who is, or at least aware. I don't know if it's 100% ever confirmed.
Yeah. Because it's him. Remember, because the whole thing is the flashback with him and his girlfriend, and it's like they were trying to do the Katniss and Peeta thing from Hunger Games, where they both just die, but then they just get shot. Or she gets shot and he survives, which is crazy.
I thought she shot him. Like she's like, I'm gonna live. It's like he got betrayed by his girlfriend.
No, I don't believe, because that's the whole thing where she's like, you gave me a reason to smile or whatever. I'm pretty sure the shots came from
I want you to rewatch this. Okay, because so when I watch this, I kind of want to rewatch because we discussed this. My interpretation is that something changed and she like wanted to fight for her life and started shooting. Then he shot out of like that fear of why she's shooting at me in that line, and they interpret this at the end. Thank you is really like I wouldn't have been able to live with killing you and live with all this like hate and anger that's built up through this competition and all the horrible things that we have gone through. That thank you for ending this instead of making me have to live with killing you. That she was like regretting her action immediately. I want this to be watched.
That does make sense. Honestly, that scene I've always sort of like never really like paid too close attention to.
Roman tape.
It is just like the sad. I mean, the whole thing is just like to outline like the sad backstory of this whole thing and his motivation for being back in this. And that's kind of a cool reversal. And then obviously the other like quote transfer student is like this total psychopath. And we'll get into, but there's like this cool scene where he's like on a roof and some kid like thinks he survived because he has a bulletproof vest and he's like fucking unsheaths the sword and like jumps down like it's straight out of Samurai Champloo or some shit. So yeah, there's some like really visceral action, like violent stuff in this movie that like it's kind of why this movie is so controversial. Like it was struggling to get released in Japan because the rating board was like, no way, these are kids. They're like murdering each other. And yet somehow it did come out.
Yeah, one last thing in the plot summary is that Shua is able to disable the collars on two of the other participants, and then they're able to go
Shuya
back.
doesn't. I don't think Shuya disables. I believe Kawada is the one who disables the collars because that's why the teacher says, you figure out how to disable them. You also have these other kids who are like hackers who like shut down the computer system, which is like this amazing scene where they're like gather sulfur and fertilizer, and I'm like, how did they learn how to do any of this? I have no idea, but it's incredible.
They're basketball hackers. They're really into basketball.
That's true. That's true. I mean, that's a lot of these characters does like flashback scenes of them playing basketball, which is like they want to skate. It's so relatable.
The funniest thing to the movie to me is the basketball scenes, but we'll get to that.
They go back, they kill the teacher, and they escape on a boat. Two of our main characters.
Kawada unfortunately meets his untimely end as they're traveling on the boat, but yeah, Shuya and his crush Nakagawa they survive.
They survive and become terrorists.
Yeah,
and then,
they're like on the run. Yeah, it's crazy.
And then they did a sequel, and she didn't come back. And it's a very good choice. But let's talk about this film. Paul, when we started talking about this month, you were one of the people who just jumped at Battle Royale, really a film that you like quite a lot. Why don't you tell us about your connection to the film and just why this one is such an important film for you?
I mean, this is just like straight up one of my favorite movies. I think like it combines so many things I'm interested in. I think, I think teen angst as like physicalized through like violence and insane actions, I think is always something I'm interested in. And I think just set something like this on an island. I love that kind of environment. I love the whole, like they get one item, like the survival mechanisms of the entire plot. Like so many of the way this is designed is really like set to appeal to me. And also like, just like it being like a bunch of Japanese teenagers is really interesting to me and what it says. Like, we'll get into some of the thematic stuff later. But it's just a movie that I always come back to and I find really entertaining, which like sounds weird because it's pretty dark and twisted in some ways. But I think it also like it's right. It has this great sense of humor that I think goes a bit underrated when people talk about this movie. And like it's so like everything's said with such a straight face that it's hard to like think of it as a comedy. But in some ways it is, and it's so many different genres blended into one. But it's like it is one of my favorite movies because it's such a fascinating like social experiment of like put a bunch of kids on an island and like they have to survive and like what will they do? What kind of factions will form? Like all those little fun little details are always really exciting to me. This is just like one of my favorite movies. It has been for a long time. And there's something that, just like I could rewatch every at least once a year, honestly, at this point.
It is very engaging for a film that is about a subject as dark as, forcing teenagers to kill each other. And what really sets it apart for me is that they set it up as it's not just so we live in a world where the Hunger Games exist. I saw the Hunger Games before I saw Battle Royale. So coming into this, I was comparing the two a lot. And one thing that I think that really sets Battle Royale apart is that Battle Royale does a lot to give you backstory on the characters. There's a lot of like flashbacks about understanding why certain people act.
Japanese cinema is all about flashbacks. That's why this is just like an anime. If you guys watch anime is just flashbacks on flashbacks for random characters who you're like, it's not even a main character. They have like this big flashback. That's like what this is all about.
I told you off camera that this is the most anime movie to me ever because not just flashbacks, but the teen angst in school uniforms. This is it.
Oh yeah, that's true. I mean, they look like anime boys. Like all this stuff is like very. That's kind of part of the reason that appeals to me too, is because this is like one of the most like live action anime feeling things I've ever seen. It captures a lot of the kind of spirit, the kind of like weird, like cute, like dark humor that will just come out of nowhere, kind of in a very otherwise serious scene. A lot of that stuff is very much in step with that.
Another thing it does really, really impressively is because you have a group of people that have pre-existing relationships. The difference between Hunger Games is they throw a bunch of people that don't know each other in an arena. And this one, you have all the really cool dynamics where it's like this girl hates this girl because of this boy, and this guy is it's interesting to watch how they're committing acts of violence because they're put in this stressful and crazy situation. But at the same time, they're still stupid ninth graders who are oh, I like that girl, and trying to make a move on the girl on the island while everyone's being killed around. They're still this. They're just still they just don't have that level of adult thinking yet. So they're still doing all these really.
But why should they? This is a fucking insane situation. That's another thing. It's I understand making that kind of critique. It's why don't they? But it's no, they're put on the island and told they have to kill each other. Well, this is nonsense. This is insane. And that's kind of one of my favorite things is the satirical edge of this is the arrogance of the elder Japanese generation who the kids are committing crimes, are doing all these bad stuff. So we'll punish them and that'll fix everything. Obviously it's not going to fix anything. And I think it's funny that it comes from an old director. This is his last completed movie. Yeah. I haven't seen his other, he's very well known for making these Yakuza films the 70s and 80s, very much crime, action, fiction kind of stuff. But it's interesting that it almost feels like he's criticizing his own generation and kind of looking in the mirror and being why do we think of the younger generation in this specific way? Why do we put our blame onto them? Why do we project all of our insecurities onto kids? And that's what a lot of what this movie is doing. It's this generation, being oh, the kids are the problem. It's it's the Simpsons thing. It's it's not my fault. It's the kids who are wrong. Yeah,
because I mentioned at the beginning that there's a historical context that's really owing to the teens acting out as a response to the generations above them failing. And as you're saying, this is instead of the older generations owning up to their failure, you just place it upon our society's gone downhill because teens don't give a shit anymore rather than realizing their own fault and blame. That they're not providing the society to them that maybe they grew up with and have. And why we are still kind of connected to teen angst, and I know you probably have some thoughts on this because you wrote a college paper about this.
Yeah.
But comparing the teen angst that is throughout this movie compared to Hunger Games, I think is a really good kind of comparison between Japanese culture and American culture, because I feel the American one, it's so hyper romantic in a way that's more mature than what it should be for teenagers, where it's about finding the love of your life. And it's a lot more playful and it's crushy and more chaste in a way than that who am I going to marry Peta and have 8 kids with him idea of what I think we think teens romanticize about.
Well, I think in general, yeah, as Zach alluded to, I wrote a paper in college that was it was for a Japanese horror class and essentially deconstructing the way that this same story through a Japanese cinematic lens is viewed this is a horror, a dark horror comedy kind of. Yeah. And through American lens, it's this YA action fantasy, right? And I think the way that the same kind of story and structure is viewed by the two cultures says a lot about our values and the way we perceive ideals like this. But I do think that, the way that it translates something like the teen angst into this very specific hyper-violent, they really make these really rash decisions that don't really make sense, but that's what teenagers do. They're not mature. They're not good players of the game in the way that I think people kind of want them to be. But that's what makes them interesting. It's people trust people they shouldn't trust because of some stupid story they told them or whatever. You know what I mean? Or even kids not knowing how to hold a gun. When that gang of kids in the beginning has the transfer student and they have him commandeered, and he just makes a move and then grabs the Uzi and kills all of them. It's they're incompetent 14-year-olds. And that's what is this movie's interest. That's why it's interesting. It's because none of them are really that capable. Even the capable ones are they're not full-fledged spec ops soldiers. The way that in the Hunger Games, the careers are they've been training for this their whole lives kind of thing. It's different in that regard too, because it's the awareness of it seems to not really be there.
Yeah, because this is a true punishment more than a reminder. Is we're just going to put these kids on to kill each other, and hopefully none of them survive. But a moment to capture that kind of naive innocence that some of these teens are going in for that really has always stuck out to me is the 2 girls who are best friends, and they just want everyone to be friends, and they're waving flags, just we don't have to fight and murder, just they are trying to black out everything that's happening around them. It doesn't have to be this ending in there. I won't say.
But the thing is, if they just all felt like that, like, aren't they kind of right? Like it is stupid that they're just like made to kill each other. Like that's insane. Like your friends who like you go to school with, like the next day you're supposed to be like, oh yeah, we'll just murder all these people that I hung out with and spend so much time with. Like again, like highlighting the insanity of the situation is what's interesting about this, because it's like. Because we're in movie world, right? As soon as like a movie's logic is presented to us, we're like, okay, these are the rules. We understand this. But it's like, if a character questions it, you should be like, oh yeah, it is still insane that they're being forced to do this right now at the age of 14. It doesn't make sense.
Isn't that the reason that they add the two outsiders into the group? That by adding them in there, you make the group as a whole less likely to
they
come
can't
together and have a
like
discussion.
20 of them. Like if there were those kids who weren't there and all the kids teamed up with the hacker kids who like broke down the Wi-Fi and the kid who can like shut down the cot, like they would all fucking escape, obviously, you know. So they have to introduce some kind of weird wild cards into the mix.
I mean, some of the most interesting moments in the film are when people do they are really stupid, and they make there's the scene in the lighthouse where all the kids are together and they're having this kind of great life going on, and then
this
one kid,
that's the best scene of the movie.
One kid tries to poison the boy that they brought there, and then some of the other people eats it, and like the girl, like this weird like girls versus boys thing is happening.
Well, that speaks to me to the tenuous nature of friendships at that age, where if something like it's not deep seated in like an emotional intelligence. So it's like if you think someone wrongs you in one little way, you're gonna snap. And just that one small mistake. I mean, she makes that one mistake where she's only like, it's such a weird chain where she's doing that because she's scared of Shuya because she saw him accidentally kill that one kid the one time. So she tries to poison him as if like that's going to be a good idea. And then obviously her friend comes home and she doesn't stop her from doing it. And then it leads to this whole shit. And then everyone just freaks out, right? Which is like what happens in this. The tension's so high, they don't know how to deal with this. They're kids again. So like their reaction is going to be very extreme and chaotic, and they're not going to have like the right course of action. Like there's not like someone who's like, sit down, like, no, we should do this, just kill this girl who just poisoned her, instead of like, who is it? And then they start shooting each other.
I mean, the real villain of the movie, the girl who got poisoned, she deserved to die. It's her comeuppance. Don't take food without asking. It's fucking rude.
She was excited, man. She was so pumped for that pasta. She was like, "Fucking give me this!" Like, and she's like, when she asked, she's like, "Oh my god, like you're the greatest chef of all time!" Like it's incredible.
She was really nice about it, but she never said please. That's it.
That's true. Yeah. Well, she was just like, "Yeah, let's go," and I was like, "Damn, this is like extreme." And that is a hilarious and crazy, insane.
But then
and it's sad at the same time too.
But then the standoff of it is also just like very engaging and kind of goofy in a fun way.
It's so easy to manipulate a ninth grader because each of the kids in that scene points the finger at somebody else, and then they go into a full-on shootout because they're not even at the age
and one of them even gets mad when another one tries to like take control of the situation and calm everybody down. She's like, "Who do you think you are?" And then that like leads to more
stop playing leader.
Yeah.
It's just like the smallest, like simplest thing. They don't have the emotional intelligence yet to being like, "Hey, we should like stop for a second. We could point the guns at each other, but we don't have to start shooting yet. We could actually like try to figure out what's going on here." Like that's not even a thought. They're just like not there. And understandably, you put immature people in like a life-changing cataclysmic situation and then ask them to be rational, and they just don't.
And they do kind of foreshadow it with enough tension that makes those actions believable too, because they have the girl that's upset at him killing her boyfriend, and they have the other one that like grabs the gun, just like visibly shaking as they enter, because like the trauma of everything else is just like really starting to get to her. She's like, we're gonna die today. So she was just like on edge to where you knew something was going to happen, and that would just happen to be.
I gotta say, living at Lighthouse looks pretty fucking fun. Like it's a pretty cool setup. It's like a great view, like it's also like, who else, like why did everyone not flock there as soon as they saw the lighthouse? It's like, this
lighthouses great for taking refuge and great for doing lobotomies
and masturbating to dolls of mermaids. Great for lots of things, quite frankly. No, but just to zoom out a second, I think one of the interesting things, kind of, we talked a little bit about the director itself, but I don't know if you guys have read much into his whole kind of rationale for the way he made the movie and everything, but he tells a story in an interview about how when he was a kid, in I think it's like 1945, he was him and his classmates worked in a munitions factory. They were not told what it was for. Obviously, it was for World War II. And then the factory got bombed, and him and the like couple kids who survived were forced to like dispose of the dead bodies of his classmates. And like that is like the inception for him to make a movie that's like this dark and this like forcing kids into this kind of scenario. And I think that's an interesting thing about his own disillusionment with his country and kind of how that's mirrored with the kids, even though he's like older and has obviously lived much more life and doesn't have as much of a reason necessarily to be as resentful. But the roots of that are rooted in something real and like in the real world, which is kind of interesting to me. It's not just like a fictional, hypothetical kind of situation. It is like something that actually happened to him that's kind of similar to what's happening to the kids.
I had not read that, but that is interesting that he would not only have that experience, but then take so many years apart to like, it is in some ways it's very smart to take so many years since you actually experienced that trauma and to come back and actually kind of comment on it. You probably, by waiting like 50 plus years, you probably have got a much better like interpretation or understanding of like the way you were feeling at that moment, and then how to, you know, conversely place that in a story that you could be set in the modern era and, you know, work functionally as a screenplay. Yeah.
And then another kind of interesting element too, I don't know if you guys are familiar really with the actor who plays the teacher.
So I read stuff about him. He's a very famous TV presenter. He's basically like, you know, he's a very famous game show presenter in Japan.
Yeah. So it's funny. His early career, he's like, I mean, he's known as Beat Takeshi mostly for like the early part of his career, and he's like a sketch comic for like him and one of his the guy he worked. I forget the name of his collaborator, but like he's this big sketch comic, and he hosts a lot of game shows, which is like what makes it extra interesting, kind of him cast in this role. But then later in life, he becomes this like serious filmmaker and like wins the Golden Lion, I think, for his film Hanabi, the fireworks, or maybe the Silver Bear. But I think he wins like a Venice top prize for like one of his films later on. He becomes this like very serious filmmaker. But I mean, in this movie, his name is Kitano, which is like his actual like family name in real life. And the director apparently like told him to play himself in these game shows, which is why he has this weird, dry sense of humor, but it's like kind of serious and not really the same tone as everyone else. But to me, like that's such an interesting casting, and like the idea that like he's this comedian and comedic figure for most of his life, and then like this is him like through a different lens is like, I can't like, there's not really a good allegory honestly for this. I tried to think of one like for the American version of that, but like it would be wild to think about like someone who was known as a comedian and everything becoming this like figure of a serious crime filmmaker, and then all of a sudden like now he's in this movie as like the beleaguered old teacher. His characters,
it's like Drew Carey,
kind of, yeah. It's like Drew Carey, but then like Drew Carey started directing. Like, he directed like Hard 8 or something in the 90s, or something, and then all of a sudden was in a movie. It was like in a movie, and he's in Hunger Games as like I don't know, fucking like Stanley Tucci's character or some shit. It is wild. Like to think of that is just crazy. And then his character is interesting too because they gave him like to me fake sympathy, where you have these sad flashbacks where he's like kind of wandering around directionless, but it almost feels parodic to me. Like I don't think it's supposed to actually elicit empathy for him, at least not for me. Like it's almost set up as like like this is like a joke of like this is what movies like this sometimes do, to try to make you feel bad for these terrible people. But to me, it at least for me, like it never really connected.
I think that's true. Also, by one of the main moments of trying to give him empathy is really just a dream. It never existed in reality.
Yeah.
Like him walking on the beach
with the popsicle. Yeah.
Well, I think also just like his first scene in the film makes it impossible for you to ever have sympathy for him, because his reaction to getting like slashed on the leg is to brutally murder 2 people. So at that point, like you can't really ever give that character sympathy. You've set it up and said, I mean, I do want to talk about him. He's great. Like absolutely fantastic.
He's hilarious.
The scene where he has to read about all the students' names and he's giving them the bag and he says that whole speech at the beginning about it. He is amazing. He's so good in this film. Like, you can quibble with, I don't know necessarily if all the younger actors are particularly good as actors. I think they play the roles in like the ridiculous game.
They're all believable teen, like to me, they're all believable teen archetypes though. Like there's not someone that's like, oh, this doesn't fit in this movie. Like it's all like crazy chaotic.
I think there's one truly great teen performance. We can get to that later, but
oh, interesting.
Okay, but I think he's the best performer in the film. I think he's, you're right. He has a weird sense of really dark humor. There's like there's a level. He's a little bit sadistic, but he's also seems to be enjoying the aspect. He enjoys the game aspect to it, which is probably
him just like standing out on the patio sometimes, like in basking in the sun, like him just eating crackers when like eating cookies or whatever, like when it's super, or when the power goes out, or when everything freezes, everyone's freaking out, he just like turns it off and he's like turn it back on. Like it's very deadpan and serious, but I find it very funny.
He's great, and he makes jumping back to the people running the game interesting. Like if you don't have that character, I would never want to go back to see what's going on with like the control booth. But watching him is he's always engaging. He's always interesting. Let's talk about the kids. We have a lot of them. So we have a lot of them die right away because they do a smart thing, I think, in that they don't really attempt to give you a lot of information about the kids unless they're the ones that survive longer in the game. You tend to know more about the ones who last longer. The ones who died, the first like 12 to 16 ones that died.
Well, Nobu, who is like Shuya's best friend, is like kind of the one that there's a big backstory to, and he comes back throughout the movie. He's like an important figure. Do you guys have a favorite death in this movie, like a specific kid's death who you find particularly like memorable or entertaining or strange or scary or anything like that? Because I think a lot of the deaths, like they are all different. Like it's like I don't think many people really die in the same kind of ways. I love the showdown sort of between Nawada and the other transfers. I think Kiriyama or something like that is his name. But when they're like in the fiery like marshes and they're like shooting each other, it's like very like dramatic, like standoff kind of Western style. Or like the exploding bus or the exploding truck when like the hacker kids like end up like facing off against him. Like I don't know. I think a lot of the deaths are pretty memorable.
The grenade in the head is pretty. You can't. It's hard to forget that one. I think that entire death, the jumping off the roof with the samurai sword, cutting the guy's head off, putting the grenade in its mouth, and then throwing in the building to try to take the other ones out, is I think probably the most memorable death.
That's insane.
I mean, I think right away, I think the first death after they leave the building, there's the guy with the crossbow, doesn't know what he's doing, and another guy just comes and like takes it and shoots him and runs away. And it's like the true like chaos of like they have no idea what the fuck's going on kind of moment. And another way that's like this is like a 10-second thing, but they're like Romeo and Juliet kind of suicide, kill each other. I find a little like heartbreaking. Also, kind of like is kind of a commentary on like the melodramatic of teen. Like,
totally, but it's like it is kind of like a little like to me it is a little emotionally like resonant. Like it kind of does actually hit where like wow, like these kids. Like they're so dumb for doing this, but like they do 100% believe that like this person is everything to them, and they're willing to die for them and all this stuff. Like that's it. Like that's interesting to me.
There's a purity to them, and that the fact that they're so dedicated to this one person. They're like, I will never participate in this awfulness, so I'm just going to end it now. Like right at the beginning.
I mean, the one that pissed me off is when the girl throws the bag off the cliff. I'm like, what? Like stop it! Like what are you doing? Like if you're gonna commit, like, you know, if you're gonna end it, but like getting rid of that is just too much.
I'm gonna galaxy brain this a little bit, and this comes from someone who's fighting against myself because I so often complained about teen angst. But for watch this movie, is it really are teens really the best of us? Like they feel everything so much, and maybe we all should instead of like killing off our feelings, and we should all just like
we got Michael Stuhlbarg over here, giving a speech at the end.
Really make life matter, and life cares, and every moment to us is important. I mean, there's something valuable in that.
I'm glad they're not making large scale decisions because that can be swayed very easily. I think, but I do think in some ways like they do represent a lot of things that I think people yearn for and like don't realize they miss in themselves, and it is this like purity of belief in other people, but again like we see like but those can change on a dime in a way that older people necessarily might not, you know what I mean? Like the distrust in the lighthouse is like evident to me of like the string is like so thin and can be so easily snipped, but it is interesting to think about them as like those kind of figures.
And a lot of that emotion is based around a sense of selfishness and self-preservation, which is where that lighthouse scene switches. Is that we see all their friends are just controlled. Even the friendships come from and you see in this movie from a sense of insecurity and need for self-worth in a way. I don't need to rail on teens here, but.
And one thing we actually have not even talked about is Shuya and his whole backstory with his father, which is like really like dark and like really wild when he finds his dad, and then the fact that the note says like you can do it, Shuya. It's like, man, that is like brutal for a kid to like come home to, and then his best friend dies right in front of him before the game starts. Like it's kind of crazy that he was even able to survive at all. Like that he even had the wherewithal to like stick it out based on like his trauma with death and everything.
Do you think in a way this is also showing him as someone who's been forced to mature a lot quicker than everyone else, and it's that level of like maturity through trauma that helped his preservation through this experience?
Maybe I think ultimately like he's still not that, like he still freezes up in moments and he's still not like fully there. I think,
and he's still like his whole motivation is a promise he made to his friend.
Yes, to his friend who like dropped out of school and everything. But we talked about the basketball thing. I actually think that's an interesting like idea where it's like this representation of their idyllic past life, right? Where it's like, oh, remember the days where we were just playing basketball, there was no care in the world, you know, we weren't like worried about like killing each other, it was just like us having fun together. And it's like this thing where they enjoy this activity together. And it's like that is like the image of their former life, and that's like the way they see their past and everything, which is like an interesting lens to see that. Obviously I support basketball in movies at any time.
Well, also like top tier, really bad basketball in movies. This really play basketball.
No, I don't think this even touches like there's so many bad basketball scenes in so many movies.
I mean, the great director of Little Fish liked my tweet about how bad the basketball is in his movie Morse from America. But so I have a list I'm keeping track, but the moment of one of the hackers, they show him and he's like close to the baseline, like perfect for like a side three there. He just like for no reason throws it behind his back. Just because I think the director's like, no one's cool about basketball behind the back passes.
He's not wrong. You know, they're pretty cool.
I will say, going back to your point about trauma making people more competent, I do think there is some lines we see between characters who've experienced rougher pasts. I mean,
that girl with that really sad backstory.
Mitsuko, the one who we find out was sexually abused as a child.
That is my performance of choice, by the way.
I would honestly probably lean on her too. I think she's really interesting. I also legitimately thought
Shibasaki. I looked this up to give her some credit as well. She's in 47 Ronin, I guess.
Is she really? Yeah, I have seen.
Is she which Ronin is she? Is she like number 45? Like she's got to be up there, right?
Mika,
the better Ronin. Yeah.
She's one of the better Ronin. I don't remember this movie at all. But yeah, I think that I legitimately thought they were setting her up to be the person who ended up walking out. For at least in the center, she seems so competent. She seems so ruthless. Even when she's talking about like the moments of like the pettiness, it doesn't always seem real like the other characters does. It feels like she's saying that as a way to like get around the fact that she's okay with just kind of brutally murdering people at that point. And then you kind of get the backstory, which kind of starts explaining.
I think Kawada is very good. I think the actor that plays Kawada is pretty good. The kid who like had won the last games there. I know he's like very like he gets the big emotional kind of moments and everything. I think he's quite good at this too.
But I think he's a good physical presence that he gets. Like, he just seems so believable as someone who can like survive through this.
I think he is one of the actors who I think is older than the rest of the cast, because I think him and the other transfer student, those actors were like 3 or 4 years older than everyone else in the cast, which like it does give a good feel of like uncomfortability, unfamiliarity, and like these kids that like we don't know them, and like they seem foreign and too capable almost to the rest of us.
I think the part of the reason why I like Coach Shibasaki's performance so much is she has the real like smartest person in the room persona that like can be hidden in disguise. Like she's trying to play a little into the shadows, but when it comes out, I think
she almost gets got pretty early on when the girl like does the whole thing where she figures out like, oh, like I saw a tampon, like I know she didn't have her period, I know you just started your period yesterday, and there's that whole interesting like kind of switcheroo that she pulls on her.
Yeah.
I did look this up. Also, the guy who plays Kawada is 5 years older than the guy who plays Shuya, and is currently the leader and founder of an anti-establishment political party in Japan, and like currently is an elected politician in the House of Councilors.
That's crazy.
I was running for the Tokyo gubernatorial election in 2020.
Wow, that is actually nuts. I had no idea. I did not know that.
There's one more thought about her character before we move on. Is that I think another thing is it's a very interesting manner of doing vengeance, where it wasn't like purely vindictive to get back at where she never fully belonged with these teens, and then very like judged without really getting to know her. Instead of her just like going and murdering everyone, it's more like she doesn't feel great about it. It's not like she's having a great time like the other the volunteer is, where he's just she's more in like what mercy am I going to get? We're in this fucked up situation. You guys have done nothing for me, so just like fuck it. She's more just like fuck it mode rather than I'm going to get back if it's my chance.
Yeah, let's talk about some of the others. What do you guys think of the girl who's always running? I think it's one of the funnier moments in the film where she's just a runner. And
and then the one guy who has a crush on her who used to like ride his bike next to her when she would run and everything.
That's the creepiest scene, going to also like the most tragic.
Yeah,
she's like real. It's just.
I mean, then the guy who's like, come on, like let's get it over with. Like you've never
tries to rape her.
I mean, I don't think he goes as that far, but he is being a real creepy dude. I do.
Lucas, you don't need to defend this guy. I promise you don't have to defend him.
I'm not defending him.
Should he be on the Supreme Court? Yes or no?
Well,
is he worse than the options we currently? Unclear.
He might be. He doesn't have, I don't know. He might be. Yeah, but again, she's just another one that ties into this idea that like if you put a bunch of 13-year-olds, they do weird stuff, and the fact that she's like, I still have to run my miles and put my running in. Like
some real Lucas energy there.
I'm not an
That's
idiot.
True, yeah. Hey, if you were like 14, I could see you being like, I got to get my miles. Like, I got to be in shape. What if I have to run like 20 miles on this island? I could see you getting into that.
I think you get to like day 2. Like, what is life even fucking matter? I can't find my protein shake. Just fuck it. And then you like commit suicide with your protein flakes.
I feel like we hadn't talked about the hacker kids. Those kids are the fucking best, man. They're some bros hanging out, hacking the system, beating the system. They even invite Shuya. They're like, hey, come be with the boys. Let's hang out. They're just like chilling out with this computer. They're, I don't know how this guy's hacking with his own hacking software that he's like created. Like, truly insane. Like, big like LeBron's kid designing his own video game energy. Like, how do you have these capabilities in the computer when you're like 14 years old? But I thought it was great. Those guys are the best.
Yeah. They just didn't have a lighthouse, so it wasn't that cool.
That's true. Yeah, if they had their own, I mean, they had a warehouse, which was like almost as cool.
I mean, I do like the scene where he's just like, go get all this random stuff. They're like the super geniuses. They're like, we know how to make like a bunch of just random.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Sulfur fertilizer. And I'm like, well, how do you make it bombs? Like, what the hell is this?
Just making explosives. Yeah, they're really fun. I mean, they do a really good job kind of delineating all the characters that kind of last longer and play an important part. Obviously, you can't make 40 individual characters that we can recognize, but I think they do a good job.
But the ensemble, like, I still think they cover so many and actually service a lot of these characters in a way. And it's like, it almost feels like the anti-slasher where it's like all of them have character and they're all kind of actively participating in this sort of thing, which makes it interesting. But again, like the way they have backstory for even like the one kid who has like the crush on the girl who dies in the warehouse, and who it's so sad. She kills him and he's like, get away from here. Like, I want you to be safe or whatever. It's like, that stuff is like legit tragedy. And he's like the 8th lead or something.
This is why actually this movie stands out to me so much higher than every other movie. This what is now a subgenre more or less of the like people having to fight until the last one survives. There's just it's a B.
I mean, it's created a video game subgenre. Like Fortnite is based on the Battle Royale scenario. Like PUBG, all these games that are like this is a whole genre of video games, and it's like the biggest genre of video games in gaming today. It's actually wild.
But even before Battle Royale, there's still like B movies and like Death Race, like is essentially like a similar thing, much more from like the media perspective. I
mean, and then there were none. Like, I mean,
So why this I think does stand out is really what Paul is saying is because compared to Hunger Games and any of these, is it cares so much about everyone's experience rather than having like one noble hero that you need to follow that the movie just wants to let tag.
And it doesn't. Everyone doesn't need to have a full arc, but they have their own thing in the movie. They have like their own, like their scenes and ideas that like they execute or things that they represent beyond just like they're just another person from district whatever to kill.
You get broader context of what it would be like to experience as a teenager. You get multiple perspectives and ideas thrown in there rather than one character trait being pushed through.
And that's somewhat what makes it so impressive is they really are. They take into account the vast differences between teenagers, how much these people are changing, how the evolution of like who you are as a person is at its peak at this moment in their lives, and that when you put them in this crazy situation, they would react in just so many different ways. You get to see people who really get involved and interested in the brutality and the awfulness of it. You get people who try to be, good in the bad situation. You get people who just go completely catatonic. You get people who are like, I need out of this. I can't deal with this. It's like it's the thing. I believe it's the Elie Wiesel quote, which is that you can get to see in true awfulness, like some people become helpers, some people become hurters. Like the idea that just, he was talking about the Holocaust, and the idea you put people in a camp, which is, a terrible, awful place. You watch how some people try to constantly look out for others and, see if they can bring 4 people along with them to keep them surviving. And you watch how others decide to start turning people in and start trying to steal stuff from other people. You get to see the differences in humanity and how we react to the worst situations. And what this film does so effectively is give you a bunch of individual, unique characters. They don't feel like characters. You were talking about Hunger Games for a second. A lot of times in the Hunger Games, it's like, oh, that's the wood district. Oh, that's the coal person. That's the ocean person. They're very much, they get stuck in
the best way to break people into categories. The coal person.
Elements. The coal person. Yeah.
I am very much a coal person.
Zach's real cadmium. Gets to get real cadmium energy.
I will say, I something I always like in movies, and it's like kind of a dumb trope, but is this idea of when somebody promises to keep someone safe, they don't really have a specific reason to do this, and they move heaven and earth to make this happen. Like Shuya promises to keep Nakagawa safe because his dead friend had a crush on her, I guess. But then he murders people for her. He tries to sacrifice his life multiple times for this girl he is friendly with, but doesn't really even know that well. It is that trope I always find interesting, and a strangely compelling device that it shouldn't work, but for some reason it often does.
He gets a real hero complex. He really wants to walk out
Well,
there.
Do you think that's the connective tissue to his dad? Is he couldn't save his dad and recover something, so he just needs to find a greater purpose to almost redeem himself?
Well, no, I mean, he even says he couldn't be there for his friend when he needed it, so he wants to be there for something. The closest thing that he can get to Nobu is really, and honestly, Nobu kind of sucks. From what we see of him, he's not great. He's stabbing teachers and kind of annoying and stealing cookies and stuff. And I'm
he's a real fuck.
He drops out of school. I'm is this guy really the guy you want to stake your life on?
But that's also
he at least belongs on the island.
Maybe, I don't know. Potentially.
That's such a 13-year-old thing, though, is to tie yourself to your friend who you haven't really gotten old enough and smart enough to realize that your friend is kind of a shitty idiot.
Yeah,
and you're if this movie happens when people are 21,
but he's my basketball teammate, and I'm
pitch Nobu, but dude, you're going nowhere and you're kind of an idiot. You need to stop doing this dumb shit because you're bringing bad shit to our door. But at 13 years old, you're deeply loyal to your completely moronic, dumb kind of.
I mean, it makes sense though, because with the whole situation with his father, that is his close relationship, and I'm sure the person that cares for him and everything the most is his friend in his own weird way. But yeah, the father stuff is really strange. It is very dark. Even when they're at the restaurant and his dad is making those weird comments about what he can't. He's we can't eat here. It's what are you talking about? It's that the flashbacks have a weird kind of tenor to them that I always I couldn't quite crack ever.
Yeah.
I feel you're not supposed. I feel that they're trying to show you the past, but they're not hand holding you. They're just kind of showing you stuff, and they're not always clear about what you're supposed to draw from it. It's easy to draw from Mitsuko's past. Oh, she has this trauma. Putting her on this island has brought up the trauma. She's using it to fuel her rage and her hatred of others. But some of the other ones, it's just oh, this is, you get kind of caught up in it and just being oh, okay, this is something that happened to somebody in the past. I'm not really sure what's going on here, but then it kind of just goes back to the future, and you go forward with the story. And in some ways, it's better that way, because it would be really kind of stupid. If
a lot of the flashbacks were added after the fact. I don't know if you guys know this. A lot of the current version that I think is widely circulated is the ones that have these added, the scene with the weird dream with Kitano and Nakagawa. That's added. That was shot after the movie was already completed. A lot of the basketball flashbacks also apparently were added in afterwards to give some kind of weird backstory. So I think I think Shuya's definitely not, and I think hers not either. But I think a lot of the other flashbacks are added in to give context, which I think mostly works. It mostly is effective, I think.
Well, there's those 3 appendices at the end of the film where they do the 3 little sequences at the end, which I was watching it. I was very confused by the choice to do that, and I was going to ask you, is that an anime thing to add little tacked on almost solely isolated stories to the end of your main story?
I mean, not real. I mean, animes have a thing called an ending, which is this big montage set to theme music, but that's like a weekly thing that like is kind of like it's like in place of the end credits for like shows and everything. But it doesn't. That's not really a big anime thing. Not it's like especially at the very end of the whole thing. Definitely not. No, because they try to have like this kind of like slightly open-ended closure where it's like characters end up and you know where they're going or what direction they're in.
It's such an interesting choice because they have the actual end. Kawada dies. You know, you get the two leads going off. They're gonna go.
They're like on the run in Tokyo. It's like what's that? Like this is like I don't like that part. I don't think I need. I kind of wish it ended with them just on the boat. Honestly, like the uncertainty of their future rather than like them literally like being fugitives in the city.
Yeah.
Like that is kind of like not necessary.
It does feel like the ending could be cut into the end of the boat. I didn't necessarily need all the dream sequences and stuff that happens at the end. That always it weirdly feels like they almost tacked on deleted scenes to the end of the movie.
Literally, you watch the whole thing through the movie, and then they just replay it as like one connected piece at the end. I honestly didn't know if you guys watched that because I was like, "Is this part of the extended cut that I watched or the regular cut?"
It was on the DVD I got, so I watched it anyway, and was a little bit confused about what the purpose was. I agree that the boat would probably be the better.
I think it's I in a way I kind of liked it. It's like a moment of like reflection as Paul was talking about the basketball, so you get to see them like have fun, and enjoy at the end of it, of kind of
it's like remember this is what they were like versus like what they ended up being at the end. But just real quick, what do you guys think of that weird painting that Kitano has or the drawing where it's like all the kids dead and it's Nakagawa who like he sees as, because obviously his own daughter has rejected him, right? That's kind of like a running theme in the movie.
I don't know.
It's her in this idyllic kind of like setting. It's weird.
Creepy ass drawing. I know it's gonna be put on my desk one day. But also whatever music's playing during that scene just fucking rules. Really
I don't think I noticed the music.
Yeah, the score in this is really good throughout.
It's a lot of
it's
really
very
famous
opera, like it's very operatic. It's like super high toned, like it doesn't have any like Japanese pop music, which I'm like kind of surprised that they wouldn't like inject into it.
I like it.
Maybe.
I will say the painting actually plays into the sequel. So I don't know if that was the intentional choice.
Oh wow!
Yes, because in the sequel, Kitano's daughter like enters the games. Well,
oh wow!
Yeah,
it's kind of interesting, actually. I mean, I don't think I'll like it. Almost pushes me to watch it. I like it, not quite, but it's like.
See, here's the thing. I think you should watch it only on the perspective that I think it is just bizarre the choices they decided to make with the second one. Just like knowing you watch the first one, you see what works, you see what doesn't, and then they go make a second one, and it feels like I can't tell.
Shuya turns into like Sarah Connor or some shit in the second one. It's like he's like a fugitive that's like has this like faction of insurgents. It's like what is he
has like an Ireland fortress that they're trying to send the children after. That's in the second Battle Royale is not kids killing each other. It's kids being used as military soldiers to take out Shuya's army. It's a truly.
I mean, that has like some thematic resonance. I think like that's kind of interesting. Like the ideas are interesting. I'm sure like the movie itself doesn't seem. Although I will say, so I know that the second film is like one scene is directed by Kinji Fukusaka and the rest of it's directed by his son. His son directed like one of my favorite movies of all time called X-Cross, which is like the slasher from 2007 that like fucking rips. Yeah, that movie's great. So I wonder if there's anything to the rest of his movies, but I know that most of his movies don't have the best reception, so I'm not sure.
I think part of the problem with the second one might just be people watch the first one, and the second one is sort of a sequel. It's very loosely a sequel. Like
I would just watch a sequel of just like another one of these games with random other groups of kids. I would totally watch something like that.
Be a better choice.
Maybe that wouldn't be artistically fulfilling, and maybe you would just like undercut the the greatness of the first one. But like it would probably be entertaining, honestly, and like at the very least, like putting random kids in a scenario that always is kind of entertaining.
What's like why horror films? It's like why horror films almost exist in the first place. Like the concept of the slasher group of kids going out and encountering the bad guy is the fundamental premise behind most horror franchises. And you could have done something, you have a good idea. You could have just run the Battle Royale over and over again.
I don't want like 10 of. I don't need like a Jarhead level like 7 sequels, but I do think that like another one would have been interesting.
Battle Royale 9.
What if like
or like with adults kind of would be interesting if they just like put like or slightly.
You're getting to me. To my idea, which I'm like convinced probably would still be bad, but like we're not producers, let's present our movies. So like what if one of the like past winners as like their Activision somehow gets power and starts their own Battle Royale and brings in all these like adults as their their inventions are like power.
Yeah, that'd be kind of interesting. Or like a bunch of teachers, even
or,
kind of
yeah,
crazy.
a bunch of teachers or a bunch of like bankers.
Well, bankers would just be boring. You have to. The thing about the teams is like their personalities and interests are so varied.
Yeah,
where it's like going by occupation.
That's what I'm saying. It might not be good, but it seems like a little more of a logical spin on it.
Yes.
Like
I'm surprised that's never been done. Like kids putting a bunch of adults into like a battle royale kind of. Maybe that scares like adult producers too much to like even approach those kind of ideas, but it'd be kind of interesting.
I will say,
like if Saw turned out to be a 9-year-old.
Yes. Oh, that's called the Book of Henry.
Home Alone.
Called the Book of Henry.
That is correct. That is correct. There was some information that came out of it, like that there were certain people using the events of Battle Royale and then like claiming they watched it or were really into it and then actually committing real kinds of.
There was there was the one that delayed like the physical release of the
movie. Yes, that's what I was specifically talking about.
But the only thing, I mean, that was just the classic American thing where it's just like he's watched the movie, like, oh, great, like. Yeah, murderers watch a lot of movies and read a lot of books. Like that doesn't say anything interesting.
Correlation is not causation.
Well, also, it's not like this guy is putting people on an island. Like there's no way to tie something a crazy situation like Battle Royale to like a real life scenario unless someone's recreating it, which like obviously would never happen. Like hopefully would never happen.
It's sort of like the shootings for Dark Knight Rises. It's like they're not dressing up as the Joker and doing it. They're not attempting to. They're not putting.
The guy in Aurora, Colorado did.
Did you really dress up as the Joker? That is.
Yes.
I'm kind of glad I missed this.
But anyway, I just think Battle Royale is an idea that I think you could see. And I know there was supposed to be an American remake for a long time, and then they didn't do it because of the Hunger Games, which like that makes sense, honestly, because even if it comes out, even if Battle Royale was a predecessor, people are going to be like, oh, this is just a Hunger Games ripoff. So it's like, makes sense. And I'm kind of glad there was not like an American version. I don't know if it would be that interesting. No. I don't think they'd be willing to go as far as this does, because like the interesting stuff about this is how violent it is. It's like that's kind of one of the more fascinating parts about it.
I think the American version is Hunger Games. Like that's how they toned it down. As they changed the romance. That's what you're going to get essentially that same kind of film. Well, it's going to be made for 12-year-olds because they don't think adults are going to watch movies about teenagers in an interesting bigger way.
Hunger Games also takes it and is like half the people in this event are basically like cyborg super killers who are literally don't have feelings or emotions. Like they take away so much of like the horror.
Only 2 districts are like the careers are only districts 1 and 2.
I know. Take it easy. I'm just saying they very quickly turn it into like they make it more palatable by making you have even a basic understanding of so many fewer characters. Like,
and there are clear villains, I think, in a way that they're not necessarily with Battle Royale. Like Battle Royale has like bad people. I guess the one guy would be seen as a villain, but like there's like a group of people who are like we have to, that's the force we have to defeat. In Hunger Games, in the way that there's not in Battle Royale.
Yeah, like basically the teacher and one guy's about it. And then there are other people committing atrocities, but at the same time you get to see information of their own traumas and like, why they may be in this position. And also you're putting everybody in a position where like they have to kill others to survive. So even the act of killing is somewhat normalized by just the basic concept of the game is like, like arguably the ones who are killing are being smart. They're playing the game the most effective way because that's the only way you win. Then we can talk about how like it's sad to watch people commit suicide or like stuff like that. But like arguably they're terrible at the game and they're doing a terrible job keeping themselves alive compared to the characters who are. I mean, it's interesting because it forces you into a weird position where you may not want to root on the people like killing others, but you also have to acknowledge that they're the ones who are doing the smartest move in the midst of a game where they're forcing you all to kill each other.
I mean, it's tipping it's flipping the morality scale totally around into a way where it's like that doesn't matter at this point. Like no one is being morally right in this. No matter if you're winning the game, if you're losing it, whatever. Like you're fucking up either way, almost. I think.
Right. Yeah.
Unless you're the guys hacking into the system,
having a good time.
End it all, yeah.
They need some beers. That's all they're missing.
they're 14.
They need some energy drink. Let's be real. They need some Red Bull.
You out here thinking these 14-year-olds aren't drinking beers at their hacking basketball parties?
Probably, yeah. They got Monsters or Rain or whatever the Japanese equivalent is.
Rain was definitely not around in.
I have no idea what that is.
It's Rain it's Rain body fuel. It's like the high performance sports.
Oh my god, I'm not gonna drink anything called fuel. Body fuel. It's like
300 milligrams.
Body fuel sounds
Isn't water just body fuel?
I'm pretty sure it sounds like you're just drinking sweat. Just like semen.
I'm in. Sweat, I'm in. I don't know about the semen part.
I think there's a couple of those scare articles every couple years. It's like, is bull semen actually in energy drinks? And the people are like, no, that's actually not.
Things I did not expect on the Battle Royale episode.
We talked about hackers. We talked about energy drinks. Paul, do you have anything else you wanted to talk about with Battle Royale?
No, I think that mostly covers it. I mean, it just was fun to kind of to rewatch this and kind of dig into a little bit the ideas behind it. I think it's interesting. Like again, like people who are not as familiar with anime, like your perspective on it's very different. I think because it feels familiar to me in a way that maybe to you it is not.
Is the constant use of like text on screen a very anime thing? Like they do all the chapters and like jumping.
Not necessarily. I mean, the flashbacks are really the biggest thing, where it's just like there will be random flashbacks in the middle of episodes that will last like half the episode and everything, and like that is like a running theme. And it's just like the aesthetic more than anything, and like the kids and like the violence. It's that stuff. It's not every detail.
The heightened emotions, I think, is very anime.
Yeah.
Zach, do you have any final thoughts on Battle Royale?
Nah, this movie rules. And I said this like I don't know because I think I've seen a lot of snippets of it as a teenager because I said my brother, who's a couple years older than me, adores this movie. It's one of his favorite movies. And he was also a big anime fan, so I kind of have some connective tissue I think in there as well. That it's nice. I have rewatched it as an adult, but I think just the older I get and the more I watch it, the smarter I find it. I feel like as I was younger, I kind of dismissed some of the angstiness to be a little obnoxious and take away, and now I'm just like so highly interested in its use of it. So this movie ages, I think, really well, and I look forward to rewatching it the next couple of years again. I can see it happening.
Yeah, so this was my first time watching it. I think it was a fascinating experience. Really great film, really enjoyable. I was just constantly impressed by it. I kept rewinding it to make sure I was not missing like small moments and beats and like dialogue and stuff. I think it's really smart and like smarter than you would think if you're told the basic premise of this film. Like if you tell somebody, oh, they threw a bunch of kids in the island and they tried to kill each other, I think you would think that movie is really dumb and like, oh, it's stupid and it's just trying to show off the kills. And like there are cool kills in this, but that's also not the point of the film. It's much more about like what they're trying to say about society and about humanity and like the psychology and how we like react to.
Well, it's using the schlock on the surface to like dig into something interesting, which like is kind of what a movie like this should do.
Absolutely. And it's just, I can't wait to rewatch it because it feels like a film that you pick up more and more each time. Like it's so dense. Like I felt like I probably missed 25% of like what the movie is trying to say, just trying to pick up on the basic moments. I love how it is so willing to slow it down. Like when they actually are introducing all the characters, they're giving them their numbers, they're giving them their bags, and they're sending them out in the game. Like it's willing to take this 10-15 minute sequence of just doing that, but then they
speed it up. The rule explanation seems also hilarious. The girl, that's very anime. They're like, these are the I'm going to tell you in this crazy, weird, cheerful voice, like the rules for killing each other in this game. It is like that is very anime too.
It also felt like what little I've seen of Japanese game shows. I know Japanese game shows are famous for being the world's most ridiculous, crazy premises.
Kitano, yeah, makes sense as the teacher.
They seem to love like games where they put people in like bizarre situations and make them do dumb, weird stuff.
Yes.
Like Extreme Survivor and like you have to like walk around naked and stuff, just crazy stuff going on. But yeah, no, really enjoyable film, really smart. I can't wait to rewatch. I feel like I'll get much more out of it. Paul, do you have any final thoughts? Do you feel like you've already spoken?
Yeah, I mean, this is just one of my favorite movies. It's a bummer I'll never be on this podcast ever again. This is my one and only appearance, but it was fun while it lasted.
Yep, we're like presidents. You only get one term, and then we kick you out.
Well, only one of us are going to be on again because we're all about to murder each other until the last one survives.
Yes.
And then I will say, I promised Lucas I would protect him.
Podcast Royale. Podcast.
Zach promised to protect me.
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest. If we're in a Battle Royale, I'm just going to run away from you two because one of you doesn't have an ankle.
So you're going to run away from me? The only time anyone would ever have said that. My Battle Royale thing is the same to my apocalypse strategy, which is I'm going to kill myself right away. That seems like way too stressful.
I'll climb a tree.
I'm out. I'm out right away.
That's going to miss on the light how it hangs because he's fearful of his face.
Maybe I will. Yeah. I mean, if there's like a bunch of drugs and shit on this island, I'll just like go fucking crazy until I'm out.
Zach, for his permanently damaged his career prospects. This one. The good news is we're not 13, so we can also just go hang out in a lighthouse and not kill each other every second that like one of us looks in the wrong direction.
But we're all
But
gonna
only
die
if you're
anyways,
fond
it
of my
doesn't
lobster.
matter.
Only if you're fond of my lobster. That's the only condition. Is you have to
We
be
just
fond
have
of
a
my
great 3 days, do all the drugs, and then die in 72 hours. Get our head explode.
All right.
Fitting way to end the episode.
We have talked about Battle Royale. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you, like, subscribe, comment, do all those the good things. Thank you to Paul for coming on, who, he may come back. He may come back if never.
Never.
He's shadow banning us now.
Never.
It's okay. We're gonna ask him about another opportunity to be on the podcast after this episode is all over.
I can make my first and only appearance then. I look forward to it.
Absolutely. Next week, we're going to talk about Shutter Island with wonderful previous guest Cody Newbury, which is another movie on an island, a little less bloody and a little bit more psychologically tormenting.
I didn't realize I made my Shutter Island joke before we aired our Shutter Island episode. Oops! Lobotomies.
This is what happens when one of us has a spreadsheet with all the dates and the other person does not. With that being said, thank you to Paul. Thank you, Zach. Thank you, everyone who watched or listened. We love you all. More content coming. We out. Peace.